Okay, hello everyone. Thank you for your patience. Welcome. I want to thank you for being here today with Fullscript and Seeking Health. My name is Kaylee. I am part of the marketing team here at Fullscript, and we're very excited to have Dr. Ben Lynch here with us today. Before we get into the presentation though, just a couple housekeeping items. This webinar is being recorded, so everyone will get a copy of the recording after the event. It also lives on Fullscript's website at fullscript.com/webinars, so you can find it there as well. Throughout the webinar too, if you have any questions, there's a question section on your dashboard. Ask away there. Dr. Lynch will be able to, I think, stop maybe midway to answer some questions, and we'll have a Q&A at the end as well. So I'd like to, again, thank you all for being here. As I said, we have Dr. Lynch here today with us. He needs no introduction as he's the best-selling author of Dirty Genes and a leader in the field of Nutrigenomics. He is also the president of Seeking Health, which is an innovative company providing supplements, courses, and tools designed to help people overcome genetic dysfunction and optimize their health. After earning his Bachelor of Science in Cell and Molecular Biology from the University of Washington, he then obtained a doctorate in naturopathic medicine from Bastyr University. I could go on, but I will pass it over to Dr. Lynch to take it away, and I will come back in for a little Q&A later on.
Perfect. Well, thanks for the intro. I am trying to change my display here. There it is. Good. Side of my head. Okay. All right. Well, good afternoon to you all, or good morning, depending on where you are. I'm here in Seattle. You guys, I'm seeing two folks can't hear anything. I see.
I'm checking in with them now and just seeing, sometimes the audio drop down on
Yes.
the control panel may help, but okay, we're getting some all goods too. So I think you're okay to go. I'll try to help some people figure it out on the side.
Okay. So yeah, hopefully you hear me all. Okay, good. So I'm going to be working with you during this presentation. I don't like it when I'm on a presentation and the speaker just talks nonstop. So my goal is to interact with you. So I'm going to be asking you questions. And when I ask you questions, go ahead and input it in the area where you're typing now for the audio stuff. So, you know, because I want to hear your feedback. It helps me. It also helps you. It's more active learning. One thing that we never learned in school was how to learn, which is something that you would think would be right away. So I'm going to dive in here because we got a lot to cover, and I want to present this in a way that hopefully engages your thinking and makes it more fun again, because oftentimes when I was also, you know, receiving, I still, you know, go to lectures too, but if we just memorize stuff or you walk away thinking you have to memorize it, that's also not very useful in practice because you can't memorize everything. And you're going to be attending another talk and you have to memorize that. So you're going to be having some resources here on hand. You can screenshot anything, you know, from my slides. That's cool. And Fullscript most likely will be giving you the recording as well. There's my mouse. All right. So methylation and gut health. This is something that it's very, very broad, and the buzzword of methylation. Methylation is simply the act of adding a methyl group to something. So I want you to think about this kind of a yin and yang cycle. So how does methylation impact your patient's gut health or your own? And how does gut health impact methylation? It's actually both ways. So you really need to see this from a two-pronged approach, because this is happening on an ongoing basis. So you can read here just fine, but methylation definitely controls genetic function. So if your patient's methylation is not functioning very well, their genetic expression isn't doing very well, and thus, you know, you're gonna have some significant issues because your patient has about 19,000 genes in their body, and every one of these genes has a function. And if the genes are not functioning, these jobs are not getting done, stuff is piling up and symptoms start occurring and significant conditions as well. Gallbladder. This is a very, very under-recognized organ in the human body. I hope to bring to light some really cool things about gallbladder and how it ties into methylation. Maybe you've heard me talk about it before, but it doesn't hurt to talk about it again. But gallbladder is very, very under-recognized and underappreciated. We tend to cut it out all too often. And if your patients have a removed gallbladder, it doesn't really matter in terms of supporting the patient as well. You still can support the patient the same way. They just don't have a bag to hold the bile in. Gut lining integrity, there's some things here which I hope to shed light with you. And it ties into the next thing of histamine and nutrient conservation. You've got to understand that, and you probably already do, that certain things demand a lot of nutrients. So for example, I shared yesterday on my Instagram. My Instagram is @drbenlynch if you don't follow me there already. But there was a woman who shared that she took our prenatal and did not experience any midline defects in her newborn child, which was awesome, especially given that her prior pregnancies, she did experience these issues. But I also, after posting that, of course, I received comments from people that said, look, Dr. Lynch, we did take your optimal prenatal and your optimal PC, and we still did experience some midline defects. And so I went back and forth with them, and it turned out that many of them had infections of some type, and infections utilize nutrients, which impact the methylation. So, and then gut health affects the methylation cycle. If the gut health is not healthy, then the methylation cycle is not spinning, and it becomes a vicious cycle, literally a vicious cycle. Bile flow is compromised, homocysteine elevates, histamine elevates because of that, nutrients are depleted, and then you start just going downhill from there because the gut is so central to health. And most methylation reactions occur in which organ? Here's a question for you. Go ahead and pop it in the box. Which organ has the highest degree of methylation reactions going on? Wow, you guys are on it. Liver, you got it. Well done. What happened there? Okay, so what causes the things glitched? Oh, well, here's your answer. So the things that contribute to methylation cycle not working, it's what I like to call dirty genes. It keeps things simple, keeps things light, even though it's not. A dirty gene is simply a gene that's not functioning at its best. And there's multiple reasons for that. And you can have remember that genes produce enzymes, not always, but often. So genes produce enzymes, and then the enzymes actually have the cofactors, so the vitamins and minerals that you provide your patients and that you test for. The substrate deficiency, what is the compound that the enzyme is actually utilizing, and what is it turning that compound into with the help of the cofactor? So you can have feedback inhibition. If that enzyme is working so fast, it's making an end product that is potentially toxic, or it's just in high enough amounts and this body says we have enough. Glutathione supplementation actually is a feedback inhibition. Why should your body make more glutathione if there's already sufficient glutathione there? So that's feedback inhibition because it conserves resources. And then there's factors which slow the enzymatic expression down, and then there's factors which speed it up. And both of these can be good and both of these can be bad. So I'm going to be jumping in right away to a pretty complex picture here soon, and you're going to be seeing this firsthand so you don't have to memorize it. So this is not set in stone. Every patient is different, but this is just a rough list that I want you to be thinking about, because I sometimes think people, including myself, jump too quickly to improving gut integrity in the patient. And so if you are improving gut integrity right away in your patient who has an inflamed gut or has obstacles to cure, it's not going to work very well. I was just talking with one of our customers yesterday, and she goes, yeah, I was using your optimal GI plus powder, and it actually made me worse. And I said, well, yeah, you can't jump to that right away. You need to be doing other things first. So because some of these compounds in there, aggravate the microbiome. If the microbiome is off or the gallbladder is off. So this is kind of my rough thing here. We always want to try to remove obstacles to cure before we start curing, but we sometimes get too excited and we forget about this step. Improving digestion, chewing, sitting down, these things are pretty common, but I have some tricks here which may really improve your practice and patient outcomes. So that's the goal of this always, right? And improving gallbladder is really, really important. And if I forget to mention it now, I want to say it just in case. What's something I didn't write down was visceral manipulation. If you are not utilizing visceral manipulation on some of your patients, or you've wondered about it, then I highly recommend it. For gallbladder and liver health, visceral manipulation is phenomenal. I had Dr. Aaron Choi work on my gallbladder, and it really made a massive difference in my health, and it was immediate. So gallbladder restoration and function is not always that easy to do. It can take time, but with visceral manipulation, it can be a game changer. Obviously, if you've got cholangitis or something, you got to be careful with that. And then you work on gut integrity. So let's look at obstacles to cure. We could have a laundry list of this. I could have a long table and I can bore you. But what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing you something which does tend to overwhelm a lot of people for good reason. It's something I've been working on for years, and here it is. So here's your methylation SAM cycle. And this is what I want you to be looking at in terms of obstacles to cure. So go ahead and start putting in the chat box here, obstacles to cure, and noting the symbols and colors here in this box, okay? So things that slow down the enzymatic function are in purple. So for example, elevated arachidonic acid slows the CEPT1 enzyme from functioning, so you get reduced phosphatidylcholine. Elevated copper slows this enzyme down. Inflammation slows this particular enzyme down. Fasting speeds it up. And then there's cofactors in green, and the substrates are above and the end products are below. Okay, so I would like to see what you would find on here with a patient. So imagine a patient is sitting in front of you right now, and you have their strategy report, you have their genetics in front of you, like you have right now. This is a slide from the strategy report. And you are discussing gut health, you are discussing lifestyle and environmental factors which are affecting your patient's gut health. What do you say to them? What things are a factor? Let's say their homocysteine is elevated, okay? Their homocysteine is 21 and they've got pretty bad leaky gut. Good, Kylie. And when you say it, I would also like you to share the particular gene. So all these bubbles are the genes, okay? So BHMT is a gene, again, it makes the enzyme, and then GNMT is a gene. So state the potential aggravating factor and the gene itself. So Kylie said inflammation and infection. And Augusta said insufficient magnesium. Good. So Kylie said inflammation and infection right here. And this is a big one. It's actually inhibiting the formation of SAMe, the body's primary methyl donor in the body. So if your patients are struggling from inflammatory bowel disease of any type, or an infection in the gut of any type, or an infection period, then their ability to generate SAM is reduced because this MAT1A enzyme is not able to take methionine, which comes from their patient's protein intake, and it can't convert it into SAMe. And then someone else mentioned magnesium. If your patient is magnesium deficient, this reaction is also slowed. So it's really important when you look at these things, you don't have to memorize it. You just look at it, and you're going to be recognizing, you're going to be seeing some things in here uh, right away that you understand. There's going to be some other things which you won't notice until years later. Look, I created this with my team, and to this day, years later, I still find things and I still find patterns. Toxins, heavy metals, excellent, good. Yep, omega-6 ratios. So gut health stuff, acetaldehyde. I don't think anybody saw this one, but what does acetaldehyde come from in the gut? Alcohol, and there it is, yeast. So do your patients have yeast overgrowth at times or candida in their gut? And are they consuming alcohol? Just those two. I tell you, this diagram really improves patient compliance pretty damn quickly, because you can say, look, if you're consuming alcohol, you're increasing acetaldehyde, and the yeast that we found on your digestive stool analysis or your organic acids test, we see that the acetaldehyde is elevated, and we know that your homocysteine is high. You came in at 13, and we want to get it around 6 to 8. And so, that's going to be a big issue for your gut health. So we got to work on eliminating the yeast overgrowth, and we got to cut back on the alcohol as well. And we got inflammation here, which is an issue, which inflammation is slowing methylation here and here. And then look what inflammation is doing down here. Now this is where it gets really beautiful. You see how orange, if inflammation, and orange, remember, is increases activity, and purple slows it. So purple slows, inflammation slows the MTR enzyme, methionine synthase, and methionine synthase. But it speeds up the CBS enzyme in order to increase glutathione production. And also this particular enzyme is also increased during infections. So think of the body as being inherently brilliant, and it knows what it needs to do. Why support methylation reactions during times of infections when it actually needs to support glutathione to make sure the body doesn't burn up? So when I saw that the first time putting these things on the diagram, I was like, holy cow, that's really beautiful and really cool. So look at this. You're going to be using this a lot in your practice. Again, this comes from the strategy and report, and we are always working on making it better. So histamine. If you know me, you know I talk about histamine a lot, and I talk about histamine a lot because it covers a lot of things throughout the body. And I don't want to say that, I don't want to put a bludgeon to histamine's head. Histamine is very important. It's very critical to our patients, but it's very easily put out of balance, very easily put out of balance. And it is compensatory. Histamine elevates because there's other processes in the human body that are not happy. So we don't want to just, suppress histamine, use antihistamines, or just catabolize histamine. We also want to understand why histamine is compensating and increasing. And one of them is NOS3. I don't talk about it in this presentation, but what I will say right now, if your patient's histamine levels are elevated, you really need to start looking at their nitric oxide levels, because nitric oxide is vasodilatory, if that's a word, and then histamine does the same thing. So it's kind of compensatory. So you also see elevated histamine in pregnancy. Basically every damn pregnancy complication that exists is connected back to histamine, which probably connects back to a dirty NOS3 gene, which you can read about in the book, Dirty Genes, which is actually practitioner friendly as well. So here's the histamine pathway. Now, this is every single gene in the histamine pathway that has to do with synthesis of histamine and the breakdown of histamine. It does, and also it looks at the histamine receptors. It does not, there are some genes that actually do other things with histamine, but I was too confused about it. and I don't even want to say it, so because I don't want to confuse you. But if what you're staring at right now is what it takes for your patient's body to make histamine and eliminate it. And then we also have to realize that histamine, even if it's produced, it is stored in cells, and it's only becomes a problem when it's released. So if you can have a ton of histamine in your patient, and if it's inside the cell, and the cells have, good cell membranes and good cell membrane integrity, then that histamine stays put. It's when it leaks out of the cell, or it bursts out of the cell, or what have you, then it can bind to the receptors and cause issues. So look on here for things that impact the gut health in your patient that connects to histamine. So what do you see? Again, purple, noting things that slow the genes down, i.e. the enzymes as well. Orange speeds it up. Green are the cofactors. Green isn't, I purposely did not, well, I still have green, but I don't want people thinking green is good and red is bad and purple's bad and orange is good. It all depends. Sometimes you want to slow a gene down, sometimes you want to speed it up. Sometimes you want a cofactor for the particular enzyme that you're working on for the patient. Sometimes you don't. Depends on what's going on with your patient. Okay, medications. Acetaminophen. Yeah, big time. So acetaminophen is a huge one. Increased estradiol, yes, that connects to the liver and the microbiome and the environment. NSAIDs, metformin. I mean, that's a pretty big one? I mean, how many of your patients are taking metformin, and what's it doing to the DAO enzyme? And what's the DAO enzyme doing? So the DAO enzyme is, if you follow the black lines, here's the histamine. Okay, histamine comes over and it goes through the DAO enzyme, which processes histamine outside the cells from the food, the drink, and the microbiome. Okay, so DAO, which you'll learn later, resides in the enterocyte, in the gut, and also other places like the placenta. Okay. LPS, good. I'm not seeing some primary ones here. So gut inflammation, okay? So gut inflammation will slow the DAO enzyme down, which then will do what? If the DAO enzyme gets slowed down, what is going to happen? If DAO enzyme slows down, what is going to happen? Good. Histamine does not get broken down, doesn't get metabolized, and thus builds up. And if it gets built up, then it has to be processed by other genes. So what is another enzyme that's right here on the report that processes histamine? Let's say DAO is slowed down. What is a major enzyme in the human body that processes histamine? Look at the diagram. I keep getting spinning wheels here. Come on. Yes, nailed it. HNMT. So HNMT is a very, very, very important enzyme for metabolizing histamine, and it uses what as a cofactor? What does HNMT use as a cofactor? SAMe, right. So in order to produce SAMe, we go back to the prior slide. Here's how your patient generates SAMe, but during inflammation and infections and low magnesium, low potassium, is your patient generating enough SAMe? No, they're not. So what's going to happen to HNMT? It's not going to work very well. So then histamine will increase. Okay. So this is, again, you don't have to memorize all this stuff. And here's acetaldehyde again. Here's alcohol again. So I'll dive into this more in a second. A little bit of fun though. This is me that you're staring at. My kids, when they're young, called me Papa. Russian influence there because my wife is Russian. HRH1, this is a histamine receptor, and this is me. So I have a fast, i.e. very sensitive histamine receptor in my brain and elsewhere in my body and in my gut. So I am prone to leaky gut. I've been prone to food allergies, food intolerances. I'm quite good now, actually really good. I still can't eat avocado or gluten. I keep trying to reintroduce it and it still doesn't work. So I just don't eat those. But if you see this on your patients, a fast HRH1, motion sickness is a big one. Car sickness, anything with motion, Wi-Fi sensitivity, mast cells are more leaky in the environment of EMF. I saw that in a research study. So just a little bit of fun. I wanted to share that with you. So this is something that is not talked about enough. And so the inhibition or the lack of genetic function of HNMT and DAO, which you just saw in the histamine pathway, which degrade histamine, can increase the amounts of histamine systemically. So if HNMT and DAO, which usually degrade histamine, are slowed down, you get elevated histamine within the gut, but that's not it. That's not all. Because if you have this pool of histamine building up in the gut will ultimately absorb that histamine, and now you've got a systemic histamine in everywhere. You've got it in the brain, you've got it in the uterus, you've got it in the skin. And so if the histamine is coming from the gut, from gut inflammation, it becomes systemic, and now your patient has bloody noses, headaches, migraines, irritability, difficulty falling asleep. They've got eczema, psoriasis, they have menstrual issues, you name it. They have pregnancy complications, and it's all coming from the gut, potentially. So in here you are chasing, if your patient comes in with a laundry list of all these complaints that I just rattle off, you're trying to nip them all. We'll do this for your nose, we'll do this for your skin, we'll do that for this, and at the end of the day, it's just a clogged up histamine pathway, probably stemming from the gut. And here, this is the title of the paper, by the way, down here. So I put this slide in here to show you how the gut-related histamine can become systemic. So painful menses may be associated with increased sensitivity to histamine. So what they did in the study is they gave H1 antihistamines to the patients on the first day of menses, and they found that dysmenorrhea was basically gone. It didn't happen. So here we are having a gut health problem in the patient who also is complaining, rightfully so, of dysmenorrhea. So what are you going to do? Are you going to focus on the dysmenorrhea first, or are you going to be looking at the whole histamine pathway? And look, when you think about these things as a pathway base, it makes your job as a health professional so much easier and so much more efficient. Instead of chasing the eczema and the psoriasis and the insomnia and the dysmenorrhea, and like the first couple of years you're in practice, you're like, holy crap, this is hard. I've got like 15 different conditions. No, you've got one pathway, which then ties into the methylation pathway as well. So as long as you keep that methylation pathway clean and you clean those genes, then it just becomes a lot easier. So HNMT is reduced in inflamed mucosa, okay? And HNMT and DAO genetic variations have been identified for patients with inflammatory bowel disorders. So now we have dysregulated metabolism of histamine within the inflamed gut. So this is huge for you all, because here we are, HNMT gets inhibited in an inflamed gut and DAO gets inhibited in an inflamed gut. And what are we seeing exploding in patient care right now? Mast cell activation disorder, right? and everybody's talking about it these days. And it's like fibromyalgia was the condition of the day, and then it was Lyme disease, and now it's mast cell activation disorder. Um, and I don't mean to be belittling that, but it's really interesting how we see these things increasing. Depending on what's going on in the environment. Right now, there's also a lot of stress and anxiety because of COVID and lockdowns and all the mandates and all that. So a lot of people are increasing their histamine because they have increasing histamine release from all the norepi and epinephrine and the stress involved that's going on. So, but these two key genes that are slowed down in an inflamed gut. Now you're going to be getting systemic histamine issues in your patient. Now, somebody asked here, what about NAT2? Look, NAT2 does support histamine metabolism. It does work right away. It's just one step to convert histamine to acetylhistamine, and then you pee it out, done. And so pantothenic acid, very, very useful here to do this, but it is a minor elimination route. I know Dr. Paul Anderson talks about acetylation a lot of histamine. The research does show this to be a minor step, and it is kind of a backup. And there's a lot of genetic variations in the NAT2 as well. It's actually a haplotype. There's multiple different SNPs that you need to be looking at in order to determine the haplotype of NAT2. And look what slows it down: elevated estradiols, Tylenol, and then you've got quercetin, curcumin, licorice, garlic, and grapefruit. And a lot of people think, well, it's like, well, God, do I stop giving quercetin or curcumin to my patient if I want to open up acetylation? Well, maybe, but you also have to weigh the balance, because look, quercetin, curcumin, and grapefruit also slow the production of histamine, right? The production of histamine goes down, and it's also slowing the release of histamine. So you have to think of this in you have to zoom out a bit and weigh the pros and cons of the things. Now, this goes unrecognized all too often. I want you to read this, just the highlighted stuff. So just one sentence, basically. And then tell me, how functional is DAO in someone with IBD, and why? So what is going on in a patient with inflammatory bowel disease or an inflamed gut with their own DAO, and why? Give me the reason why, Avery. Nailed it, Courtney. Good, there we go. Courtney got it, Joe got it, Renee got it. Good, Stephanie. Good, Karen. Awesome. Excellent. So here we are thinking that, we want to quickly get our patients on supplements which restore gut integrity, like, glutamine. And if you do that, that's great, because glutamine is the primary fuel for the enterocyte, right? And then we can get our DAO back. But if you have inflammation there and you got high histamine there, by giving glutamine, that inflammation could actually potentially convert that glutamine to glutamate, and now you've got headaches and irritability and insomnia in your patients. How many of you have given L-glutamine to a patient and experienced a phone call or an email or another patient follow-up visit and said, God, that L-glutamine really backfired on me. I've got headaches and irritability, and I'm just not feeling right. I'm feeling just not good. Yeah, exactly. Because that L-glutamine just converts right to glutamate. And if your patients are inflamed and you're giving L-glutamine to restore their gut, and that's what you're taught, it's going to backfire on you. So you've got to quench the inflammation. You've got to calm the fires first. You got to get the magnesiums on board. You got to calm the glutamate. And once you do that, then you can start repairing. I'll use my keyboard here. Okay, so this just goes on. If you didn't, I should back up a little here. DAO is located in the intestinal villi. In an inflammatory process, the intestinal villi are destroyed. If the intestinal villi are destroyed, then DAO has no home. If DAO has no home, then histamine levels increase. So you've destroyed the home of the DAO because the intestinal villi are gone. So it's important to know where these genes and the enzymes live in order for them to do their jobs. So this is an incredibly important point. DAO also lives in the placenta for pregnant moms. So DAO activity is a proposed marker for the integrity of the intestinal mucosa. So DAO testing, Cheryl Burdett is a big fan of DAO testing. I'm not sure. I haven't used it clinically personally. Have you all used DAO clinically, and has it been pretty helpful for you? And if you have also used DAO testing clinically, has it not been useful? Yeah, Joanna, I'll definitely repeat questions. I'm not answering too many questions right now. Yeah, so I'm seeing not useful, haven't used it. So I haven't seen anybody say it is useful. So, it seems like it would be potentially useful. But here's something about histamine. Histamine is metabolized very, very fast in the human body. It's actually like a minute. In 1 minute, it's metabolized. It should be metabolized. So I'm not so sure about DAO testing. And we see here that the higher the degree of inflammation, the greater the DAO inhibition. So the more inflammation, the less DAO function, and the higher the histamine. So I don't like lab testing very often. Sometimes you have to do it. But here's a histamine intake that came from a paper that I just shared with you above too. So you can screenshot this if you want. You can make your own, but you have your patient score this quickly. Mild to severe, so 5 is severe, 0 is no symptom, and then you have your GI, skin, cardiovascular, respiratory, and so on, and the conditions that are related to histamine in these areas. So everything that you see on the left column, abdominal pain, colic, so on, menstrual cramps, there it is associated with histamine. So if your patients are, throwing 3s and 5s all over the place on this, then you just, okay, their histamine pathway is dirty. And then we also need to look at their methylation pathway. If they're looking at a lot of 0s and 1s and a few 2s, then not so bad, right? So it's pretty handy to just do the type of questionnaires like this. So this again from that same paper. For some reason I didn't put on the bottom here, sorry about that, but it's listed on the other slides. So DAO supplementation has significantly improved all symptoms in that intake card. But I also want to specifically highlight the GI. The p-value here is quite low. And so the GI symptoms, since we are talking about gut health, is significantly improved from just giving a month of DAO supplementation. So because an inflamed patient cannot produce DAO, and telling them to avoid all these certain foods, going low histamine is another stressor. And what does stress and anxiety do to histamine? It releases it and it causes histamine issues. So you're going to get a lot more compliance from a patient. I mean, you can ask them what they want to do. Would you like to take a DAO supplement? in order to be more tolerant to various foods and be more free with your diet. Obviously, you know, if you're allergic to certain foods, you can't not be taking DAO, but if you're intolerant to some of them, just because of the histamine, then go for it. You know, this is not, you're not going to be recommending DAO if someone is celiac. I mean, you can for the histamine issues, but not to enable them to eat gluten. So I am gluten intolerant pretty significantly. And I do not eat gluten and then take a DAO supplement. I just don't. I just avoid it. So it's not a free for all, right? Gallbladder. Let me back up here. Questions. Um, can you recommend DAO to children? Absolutely. Yes. And this is, it's not tested, but there's a lot of health professionals that are giving histamine block, i.e. the DAO enzyme from Seeking Health, to pregnant patients as well. And because pregnancy is associated with nausea and vomiting, and nausea and vomiting is tied to hyperemesis gravidarum, that's how you pronounce it, which is tied to histamine. Again, so if you reduce histamine, and doctors will prescribe Zofran or Zantac for pregnancies for nausea and vomiting. And at the end of the day, you think, okay, what supplements can I use during pregnancy? Well, histamine block is a safe one because it supports DAO metabolism, and the placenta makes DAO in itself. But if the gut health is bad and the placenta membrane integrity isn't very good, due to low phosphatidylcholine or high homocysteine or what have you, potentially the DAO in the membrane of the placenta is also not functioning very well. So giving histamine block during pregnancy, breastfeeding, children can be a game changer. So I'm going to be talking about the supplements later in more depth. So I'm going to pause some of those questions as well, because there are some downsides to DAO as well. Avery, you've heard of taking beef liver capsules to increase DAO in the body without taking a DAO supplement. Um, just think about the mechanism of action. What is it in the beef liver capsules that is supporting gut inflammation or the liver in general, or just methylation in general? So beef liver itself does not have DAO. DAO resides in kidneys. And then it needs to be heavily concentrated and stabilized. DAO is very unstable, so it has to be stabilized as well. So I couldn't answer that. So gallbladder and methylation. So you learned that histamine is really a big potential issue for gut inflammation, and you want to tackle the histamine. I will show you with some Seeking Health supplements in a bit of how to do that. Histamine block is one. And now I want to be talking about the gallbladder and the methylation, because methylation is directly tied to the gallbladder as well. Now, PEMT is very polymorphic in the population, meaning it's very prevalent, and it depends on the situation. It depends on the type of SNP. A lot of times, the polymorphism in PEMT, you have to understand that a genetic variation is going to change the sequence of how the gene is built, or how the enzyme is built from the gene expression. And then if there's a change, the shape changes. So anytime you change the sequence of a particular gene, the enzyme construct that is produced by that gene, it can be different. The shape will change. So for example, for MTHFR, the genetic variant that is associated with MTHFR polymorphisms changes the shape of the MTHFR, so it doesn't bind riboflavin very well. So if your patient has an MTHFR variant and they have low riboflavin, then MTHFR isn't going to work very well. if you give that MTHFR patient more riboflavin, then you are going to increase the likelihood of their MTHFR enzyme working, regardless if it has a genetic polymorphism or not. So a lot of times people reach for methylfolate when they see an MTHFR variation, but it may be just a riboflavin deficiency, and riboflavin is actually very commonly deficient. So for PEMT, it's estrogen. So postmenopausal women are going to be having a further deficiency of phosphatidylcholine, weaker cell membranes, more prone to fatty liver, and postmenopausal, they're not going to be having babies at this point anyway. But choline deficiency is a huge issue. What lifestyle increases choline deficiency? Good. Yes. Vegans and vegetarians, those who avoid eggs and meat. Choline is heavily found in eggs and meat. Not a recent study, but a study, I think it's Zeisel, Dr. Zeisel, Zeisel, I think, publishes a lot on choline in pregnancy. A human equivalent for ideal amounts of choline during pregnancy is about 800 milligrams a day of choline. And what they found in studies that these baby mice grew up, they never got dementia from sufficient choline in the mama during pregnancy. So choline is massively important. Fatty liver is a huge issue these days. It's extremely common. By the year, I think it was 2025, they're talking about 5 million liver transplants needing to happen because of fatty liver issues. There is no drug to date that supports fatty liver reversal. They are working on one, but I think they're only in stage 1, maybe stage 2 of clinical trials. So it's still a while out, but it's looking somewhat promising. But nothing is better than actually addressing the underlying causes, right? But low choline diets are a huge issue. So this whole ketogenic movement, this high fat movement, low carb, are people getting sufficient choline in these types of diets? Or are they just eating a bunch of fat? So there's a lot of dietary fads out there which are going to be pretty extreme. And then we have the carnivore diet, which I'm actually somewhat pro for. I'm good friends with Paul Saladino, and I think there's something to be said about the carnivore diet. But I think it also depends. And I think some of these diets and dietary intakes should be used for a certain amount of time and then switched out of. I don't think you should just get stuck on keto or carnivore or Mediterranean or what have you, day in and day out for the rest of your life. Maybe you change the environment you live in or what have you. But low choline definitely causes an issue. You get abnormal phosphatidylcholine synthesis that leads to cell membranes that are leaking. You're going to have all sorts of problems with cell membrane issues because of that. Then you have lipoprotein secretion issues, and you have cholesterol buildup in the liver and then the brain. You're going to have oxidative damage because of these fats are becoming oxidized and damaged, and they're going to be causing dementia and inflammation and cellular necrosis and so on. So it's just not a good situation. So you've got to have sufficient choline. Okay, and I like the statement here, the intricate connection between the liver function, one carbon metabolism, which is another phrase for methylation. So if you're ever researching and you're typing methylation in PubMed or on the internet, you're not really getting stuff, type one carbon methylation and whatever it is you're looking for. One carbon methylation and fatty liver, one carbon methylation and pregnancy, one carbon methylation and cardiovascular disease. So because if you just type methylation, you might find something really weird about a particular gene and you're not really getting anywhere. This is beautiful, okay? Now, this is something which makes a lot of sense. Now, what is the number one type of gallstone out there? okay, which then leads to gallbladder attacks and the removal of gallbladders. So what is the number one type of gallstone that occurs in patients? Good, good. All right. Not oxalates, no. It's cholesterol. So cholesterol gallstones are the number one type of gallstone formed. Now, think about this for a second. Cholesterol is thick, and it's like if you have a type of oil that's sitting on your counter and it becomes hard, uh, in a somewhat even a room environment, room temperature environment. It becomes a problem. How are you going to move that sluggish, high cholesterol bile through a tiny bile duct, through a tiny sphincter of Oddi into the small intestine? You're not. So now you're going to start getting this sludge building up in the gallbladder, and then it just can't get out, so it just continues to build up, and then you don't have sufficient phospholipids, and now you got even more fatty stuff accumulating in the liver. Now you've got fatty liver and gallbladder that's messed up. And here is the key ratio. What's the ratio that you see here that it requires for healthy slippage of bile to get through the bile duct, through the sphincter, and into the small intestine? What is the ratio needed? And okay, 10 to 1. 10 to 1 what? 10 parts of what to 1 part of cholesterol? Phosphatidylcholine. Phosphatidylcholine. Is phosphatidylcholine, well, it's made by 2 routes in the human body. Okay, and I'm gonna back up and I'm gonna show it to you. Okay, look at this. Here's Sammy. PEMT makes phosphatidylcholine, and GAMT makes your creatine. These two use 80% of your patient's methylation. The synthesis of phosphatidylcholine and creatine every single day uses 80% of your patient's methylation. Okay, that's massive. We also found out that histamine uses methylation. We also know that estrogens use methylation. And we've got neurotransmitters as well. We've got all sorts of stuff. We have arsenic that uses methylation. So we have all this stuff, and only 20% of methylation is left after dealing with the synthesis of phosphatidylcholine. So you've got to make sure that your patients are consuming sufficient choline and that their methylation is working very well. And if it's not, if they have gut inflammation, is your patient generating sufficient phosphatidylcholine? If your patient has gut inflammation or gut infections, are they generating phosphatidylcholine? No, not really, because of the PEMT enzyme is not working very well. However, there is a secondary pathway, the choline, the CDP choline, SEPT1 will help make phosphatidylcholine. But look here, elevated arachidonic acid and low magnesium prevent this. So if your patient has gut inflammation, gut infections, low magnesium, they're not taking their fish oil, they have increased excitotoxicity. That's interesting. I wonder what that means. I have to look at that paper. I don't remember. Then their backup route for phosphatidylcholine isn't going to be working very well, especially if they're vegans or vegetarians or just, hardcore keto and just eat fat all day long. I'm a fan of keto, folks. I like keto. I just think it's abused. Okay, so again, if we have methylation dysfunction, we get gut dysfunction, we start getting gallbladder issues. If we start getting gallbladder issues, now we're going to start getting all sorts of other issues because you've got to be not just digesting fat, but you got to be, doing other things as well. So, what condition typically has gallbladder issues in women? Very, very common to have gallbladder issues during this in women. Yes, pregnancy. Nailed it. So if your patient is pregnant and they start having gallbladder issues, you know right away, A, they're a vegan and vegetarian, they're not getting sufficient choline. B, you also suspect that their methylation isn't working very well, and methylation has to be working very well during pregnancy. If it's not, that baby is going to be struggling, and then you're also going to be struggling with histamine problems, and then you're going to get preeclampsia and all sorts of other pregnancy complications. So get this ratio up. Get the 10 parts of PC to 1 part of cholesterol, support the pathways, and so on. So, fasting. Fasting increases cholesterol ratio because they're not getting sufficient choline intake. So there's a lot of hype about fasting and intermittent fasting, time-restricted feeding, how many days can you go fasting, and so on. Just know that fasting can be a problem for gallbladder issues. So keep that in mind. And then also the ketogenic diet can be a problem for the gallbladder as well if they're not getting sufficient phosphatidylcholine synthesis, because here they are eating a lot of cholesterol and they're not getting sufficient choline, and then their ratio is off. That ratio is off, that bile is thick, and then they're going to be not doing very well. And how many people do you know that are on a ketogenic diet having gallbladder issues, right shoulder pain, and so on, and they take lipase to help digest, but the underlying problem of their gallbladder is not addressed. Okay, this is kind of a weird slide. It doesn't transition well. Apologies for that, but it'll make sense in a second. And we did talk about oxidized fats already. So if you have higher cholesterol levels and you have a reduced ability to mobilize fat out of the liver, which is what PEMT gene also does, it helps export fats from the liver, then you're going to increase oxidative stress, and then you're going to have elevated lipid peroxides, 8-hydroxydeguanosine. So definitely check these in your patients. But these are issues here that you have to address. But PQQ is a great cycling agent. So if you use vitamin C as an antioxidant, it only has 4 redox cycles where PQQ has 20,000. So I've just noticed the time here. But PQQ was able to reduce the reactive oxygen species in an impaired liver, and it also upregulates a variety of antioxidant properties such as glutathione, SOD, superoxide, and this one actually don't know what it is. So PQQ upregulates all these particular glutathione enzymes, which is really, really important. And giving glutathione to someone with an inflamed gut doesn't always work well. How many of you have tried using glutathione in patients to only have it backfire? Glutathione is a very tricky supplement to use for various reasons. So PQQ is one of those types of antioxidants that works really well. I have not seen PQQ backfire in a patient yet. Ox bile and SIBO. So the human small intestine is rarely, relatively devoid of microbes under normal conditions, but bile acid secretion is decreased in liver cirrhosis, which then leads to bacterial overgrowth. Listen to this: tying the bile duct, so preventing the bile duct from releasing bile, leads to bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine. Concentration of conjugated bile acid in the small intestine is an important factor of microbes in the small intestine. Okay, so bile duct ligation in wild-type mice caused a 10-fold increase in aerobic bacteria and a doubling of anaerobic bacteria. It also caused bacterial invasion in the intestinal mucosa, okay? When they removed the bile duct ligature and the bile was able to flow through the bile duct again, the SIBO went away. So, administration of conjugated bile acids normalized bile secretion, and so it eliminated intestinal bacterial overgrowth, decreased bacterial translocation, et cetera, et cetera. So SIBO, folks, think gallbladder. Don't just think, oh, I got to take you off of prebiotics, got to take you off of probiotics, I got to get you off of fermented foods and all this stuff. You got to step back and think gallbladder. You got to step back, think methylation. You got to step back and think histamine and so on, and cholesterol intakes. And I also found this on the internet, which you can find everything on the internet these days. But I wanted to share this with you because this person was talking about SIBO, and this person thinks, here, I've had a massive breakthrough. I believe this problem is a lack of bile. I've been taking ox bile for a couple of days and it's been a massive improvement. Okay. So here is the summary of the issues, the steps, and the connections with Seeking Health supplements. So, the list on the right are the Seeking Health supplements that you can use from Fullscript, and here are the steps on the left that we've gone through. I can tell you that when you utilize these steps appropriately and the enzymes or the products at the right stages, you will have phenomenal results. So you want to make sure that you're using adaptogens. Optimal adrenal is a great combination of adaptogens along with some herbs, and some pantothenic acid as well, some vitamins. Lithium orotate is phenomenal for anxiousness. Just 5 milligrams of lithium orotate can really take the edge off of people. My teenage son would come to me during final exams and say, Dad, I'm having a panic attack from this test. What can you give me? And I'd throw him a lithium. Sometimes an optimal adrenal in addition, but usually just lithium, and it really helped him out quickly. Histamine block is phenomenal during the initial stages of your gut health protocol. So when you're working with your patients, histamine block, while it is somewhat expensive, it can really, really help them heal faster because histamine is pro-inflammatory. It's pro-immune activation. So by giving histamine block, you're going to be really calming the storm in their gut. And then PQQ is a great antioxidant, so you're going to be also putting the fire out. With PQQ lozenge, make sure that you just swallow it. You can bite it once and then swallow it. I like the lozenge because it dissolves quite quickly, but I don't like the lozenge because it can make your mouth blue. Ox bile, give ox bile somewhat early on in the stages as well, but make sure you got the histamine and the PQQ on board first. And I like giving the ox bile in the evening before they go to bed, away from food. If you give that ox bile, right before bed, then we have two different potencies. I would start with the 125 milligram, not too heavy, but that ox bile will just blow up the SIBO while they're sleeping. So the PQQ will help neutralize the pro-oxidation that's happening from that event. The histamine block will also, keep the histamine in check. But giving ox bile in the evening will help get rid of some of that SIBO stuff. And then you're working on the gallbladder after that. And then you're going to giving the optimal PC and calcium deglucarate and so on. Calcium deglucarate, folks, phenomenal if your patients are struggling with constipation and gallbladder nutrients as well. Optimal PC is a pretty thick fat. If some patients don't do well with optimal PC, stay on the calcium deglucarate longer, along with the gallbladder nutrients longer before you give the liposomal products or optimal PC, and that can really help. I like taking gallbladder nutrients before bed. I don't have any issues from it. I like the full serving size of 4, and the calcium deglucarate is 1 capsule. Then the optimal PC, I like it in the gel cap. And just chewing it is fun. Our 13-year-old boy loves optimal PC. I give it to him every night. And then you hear about how choline ties into that fishy odor thing. What do we call that? Come on, folks, you know what I'm talking about. What is that fishy odor? Oh my goodness, from choline. TAO, is it TMAO? There it is. TMAO, yeah, trimethylene something of something. So TMAO is this whole thing from Cleveland Clinic. They happen to sell a test for TMAO, so there's a little conflict of interest. But TMAO is choline that produces a harmful product called TMAO, and it's because the gut microbiome is off. So again, you don't want to be giving a bunch of choline or a bunch of phosphatidylcholine in someone with a bad gut. So that's why I also like giving ox bile first to blow out some of these harmful bacteria and an overgrowth of it. So they did not find TMAO in individuals with a healthy microbiome. They only found them in unhealthy microbiomes. So your fear of phosphatidylcholine and choline is legitimate in people with unhealthy guts. So work on getting their gut a bit healthier before you work on those other things. So ox bile and gallbladder nutrients and calcium glucarate can really help with that. And then you work with the gut lining restoration of optimal GI plus powder. I like mixing the powder in a water bottle, such as this. Put 2 to 3 scoops in here, and I'll fill it with water and have my patients sip it throughout the day. I just do pro bono these days in my own kid, my own family, so I don't see patients anymore. Optimal GI is the exact same formulation as the powder, but there's no glutamine in it. So you can give optimal GI sometimes in the evening, or for your patients who are sensitive to L-glutamine, you can give the optimal GI capsules. And then Probiotics Dominix is a histamine-friendly probiotic that has been helping patients immensely with histamine issues. One trick that is an off-label use of Probiotics Dominix, there's a couple of them. Acne. Acne is phenomenal response with Probiotics Dominix. Open the capsule or use the Probiotics Dominix powder and onto a clean washed face that's slightly wet. Apply the probiotic to the acne, and they will wake up in the morning and the redness will be significantly improved in one night. I know because I have teenagers. So the Probiotics Dominix powder or the Probiotics Dominix capsules are phenomenal for teenage acne, along with liver nutrients and calcium D-glucarate. And then another one is in the nose. So you can use the Probiotics Dominix powder or the capsule and opening it vertically on one end and sniffing the capsule into the nasal passage and getting the microbiome infused with Probiotics Dominix will really open up the sinuses and slow the mucosal dripping that happens in so many people, and that happens within seconds of putting the probiotic in the nose. There are studies on probiotics in the nose, and it's very, very useful. This is an website off-label use. But I wanted to share both of those with you because both of them are phenomenal outcomes. So, and we've come out with a new histamine block plus, which has just literally been flying off the shelves for people with pet dander issues, seasonal allergy issues, and those who are intolerant to histamine block. So if your patients are not responding well to histamine block, the histamine block plus is what they need. How do you neti pot with the Probiotics Dominix? I've never recommended a Probiotics Dominix in a neti pot. Might not be a bad idea. I just like to get it right here in the immediate nose. I don't want to get it too high in the brain and stuff, you know. I mean, it shouldn't get in the brain, but still, I just like to put it in the nose. So the neti pot makes me a little bit nervous. With the face, make sure they're also using filtered water because chlorine kills bacteria, obviously. So make sure they're using filtered water in the shower. You can get a chlorine shower filter. And the Probiotics Dominix intranasally, you can use the Probiotics Dominix powder. You can remove the powder and put it on the tip of their finger, washed, and you just, wipe it in here. And it literally is like an eighth of a teaspoon, a fifth of a teaspoon. It's not much, it's small. If you do too much, you actually will clog their nose. The probiotic for histamine intolerance, at the same time with SIBO. Note that I provided histaminics at the bottom of this list, and I have things which address SIBO higher up, with the histamine block, the digestive, the ox bile, the gallbladder nutrients. So you start pumping bile and supporting the gallbladder to produce its own bile and secrete its own bile, then the SIBO will improve, and then you can give the probiotics later. So again, I do believe that the sequence, while it's not perfect, it is a good sequence of events that will generally improve your patients. And I want to share, so you'll have all this, the gallbladder nutrients. Its focus is to support bile production and flow. Somebody talked about TUDCA. I do like TUDCA as well. My understanding of TUDCA is not good. And Seeking Health doesn't offer TUDCA. We offer ox bile and gallbladder nutrients. But my experience with TUDCA has been favorable. So if you use that, yeah, continue going for it. But this has been a phenomenal supplement for folks. Low stomach acid, by the way, will cause gallbladder issues because you need the stomach acid to help trigger bile flow. Here's your histamine block. It's just DAO2. But look here at feedback inhibition. If you give DAO, your patients produce imidazole acetaldehyde, okay? And then if that increases, because this particular gene is slowed down, then their histamine is going to be problematic. So some people do not do very well with histamine block. And it might be because it's not the right supplement at all. It's not what they need, but they might have deficiency of zinc or niacin, or the ALDH gene may be inhibited from Tylenol or NSAIDs or oxidized fatty acids, or just elevated reactive oxygen species. So what I did then is I looked at this pathway and I bottled up everything in terms of the cofactors and the end product. So every single one of these green cofactors plus these toxic end products of ammonia and hydrogen peroxide are dealt with in histamine block plus. So these are all the cofactors in the histamine pathway, plus the nutrients needed to help process ammonia and hydrogen peroxide. And this stuff is just incredible. You will feel the patients should feel the results within a minute or two of taking this, and that's no exaggeration. So you can read the reviews on our website. You can also purchase this, I believe, at Fullscripts. And there's labels here. So any other questions? Is there a vegetarian version of histamine block? There is not. Spore-based probiotics okay for SIBO? Not sure. I would think not. I would address SIBO first. What functional genetic tests should be done prior to recommending supplements? I like Strategene, but any genetic test that you get on the market is not going to be giving you the full ability to use supplements, because look, if you have lifestyle factors or environmental influences, I could remove all this purple and orange stuff and I could just show you the green cofactors. And if I showed you that this person has a slow DAO and slow ALDH, this is my wife, by the way, she takes one sip of alcohol and she goes, there goes my legs, because she is high histamine from that. But now she takes a histamine block if she does drink alcohol, which is very rare. So, I mean, she is just a disaster for the gut health. And she has gut health issues. She has inflammatory bowel disease at times. Well, it's more IBS actually, not IBD. But you cannot base supplement recommendations on genetic testing alone. You have to have the epigenetics as well. And so any genetic testing company that just talks about cofactors and take this, take that, without looking at epigenetics is doing you a massive disservice, and it's not going to be helpful. Because look, you could have no genetic variations in this pathway. You could have the perfect pristine genes, like HNMT can be completely uninhibited with a polymorphism, yet they can have an infection or high homocysteine, or they could have SAM cofactor issues in the methylation pathway, and regardless of SNPs or not. it's going to be an issue. Or they could have blockages down here with MAO-A or low riboflavin because methylhistamine gets feedback inhibited on that. Histamine block is DAO. Any of these not suitable for children? Optimal adrenal helps kids a lot. It's 3 capsules per serving, so you can use less. Gallbladder nutrients, also good for children, 4 and above. Serving size is 4. You can give 1. The capsule is fairly big. You can open the capsule and put it in some food. Be mindful that it does have some betaine hydrochloride, so it's going to be pretty acidic, but it's buffered in some of these herbs too. It actually did used to be a powder because I like powder, but patients weren't taking it. Histamine block is safe for kids. Histamine block plus, safe for kids, and histamine block plus taken in the evening before bed. Also very, very useful because histamine is an excitatory neurotransmitter. So histamine block plus prior to sleeping is useful. And you take histamine block plus any time of day with or without food. This label thing here is wrong. My team did not consult with me, but before they put that on there, they are incorrect. It supports systemic healthy degradation of histamine, not just food derived. It's all histamine. Optimal PC, safe for kids. Kids do like to chew on the soft gel. It's fun. It makes a little popping sound. Ox bile, that's pushing it. 125 if you're going to do it, but I would do it in an older kid, and definitely before bed, or with a meal if you're working on digesting fats. PQQ, good for kids. Optimal GI Plus, kids are going to be balking at this. They're not going to like it. We are coming out with a peach flavor here in a couple weeks. I believe it's launching. The peach flavor is way, way, way better. And we just have a no other flavor in this because of gut health, right? I want it as pure as possible. This can be used for kids. Probiotics Minix definitely can be used for kids and their kids' acne. And you can use ox bile for someone without a gallbladder. Absolutely. You would use the ox bile with meals. You know, I would use the 125 first. Always start with the lower potency before you move to the bigger one.
I'm going to jump in and, sorry,
Yep.
Dr. Lynch, just to answer a question that is coming through, and probably one that I could have mentioned earlier, that it looks like currently the Seeking Health products are just on the US catalog of Fullscript right now.
Okay.
So unavailable in Canada at the moment. I'm sure things potentially may change in the future, but for those looking, it's the US catalog right now. So we've had a few questions come through on that. So apologize, should have definitely mentioned that earlier. But you know, the valuable information in the webinar is great for everyone. So yeah, sorry to cut you off there.
No, that's good. And you go ahead and moderate the last few questions because I've gone over on your time as well.
No, that's okay. The amount of questions that have come through, I think, have been maybe the most I've seen in webinars. That such an engaging presentation. I think you've, you know, like have answered quite a few of them. There was a couple at the beginning. You know, you showed a histamine intake survey. Do you have a methylation intake survey that you like as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. In my past Seeking Health Educational Institute conferences, i.e. ShyCon, we have some questions there, but also in Dirty Genes in the book. I don't know if Fullscript still offers that or not, but there are quiz questions in here which you can convert into questions. So,
oh, cool. Yeah.
So in here, it's like on page 68 on MTHFR, you know, I struggle with depression. I have cold hands and feet. I take supplements with folic acid, DAO. I tend to suffer from one of the following symptoms: eating leftover citrus fish. I'm sensitive to red wine and alcohol. COMT, I suffer from PMS, sensitive to pain, become easily anxious or irritable, et cetera, et cetera. And then we also have a whole appendix of labs in the back of the book as well. And we talk about the various labs that are associated with the particular enzyme. So here's DAO that we just talked about heavily today. And so we have a comprehensive list here, and then general labs as well as where we get those labs. So Dirty Genes is for health practitioners as well, and it actually makes your life a lot easier as a health professional, not having to repeat this stuff over and over again. You can just toss them a book and say, go home and read it, please.
Yeah, and I am just checking too to see if we still have the option of offering that the Dirty Genes book. I know if we do, or if there's places we can get it, we will include it. As I have said before, this webinar has been recorded, so everyone who had to drop off, or if you weren't able to attend, all the registrants will get access to it shortly after, as well as lives on Fullscript's website under our webinar section. So I'm conscious of time, so I want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here. Again, what an amazing, value-packed webinar, so much information, and I can see by the engagement and the thank yous that everyone has also loved it as well. Thank you, Dr. Lynch, for taking the time out of your day to be here. We hope to do many more in the future with you.
Perfect. Sounds good.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and we hope to see you again in the future as well. Have a great rest of your day.